about sites. I considered our role essentially tonight is to provide information, and we can discuss kind of process and end game perhaps afterward. But a lot of people didn't really know where the sites were. Of the 4 cities in the state of Ohio, most of the other cities had one site specified in the constitutional amendment. We had 4. And so it took us a while, but we mapped those 4, thank you, Travis, on GIS. So here's the basic tableau. You'll notice the Interbelt 90, kind of crossing the Cuyahoga River. The lake is up to the top left. Public Square is more to the center top. And let's go to the slide, the next slide, David. Those are the 4 sites. So we're going to look at those in sequence. Site number 1 is called the Riverview site. We'll show that in a little more detail in a second. Site number 2, the Scranton Peninsula. You'll notice the leg that kind of is a tendril down south. That's just the plot that comes up. Site number 3 is called the West 3rd parking site. All 3, 1, 2, and 3 are in rather low elevation. We'll discuss that. The 4th site is the Higbee building. The first 4 floors of the Higbee building, not the whole thing, off Public Square by constitutional amendment. When you look at a section through Tower City to have a sense of how big or where is everything relative to each other, to the right of this section through the Tower City complex is Public Square. So it says pedestrian level over to the right. And over to the left, you'll see Cuyahoga River at the bottom elevation, Scranton site off to the left, the Riverview site, which is 90 feet below really where Public Square is, and also Huron. So there's a 90-foot elevational drop. It's important to know that. And as a professor for a design studio, I think that's great to have topography and to be able to deal with that. But in terms of connection back to the city, it's something that we'll discuss in a minute, because as we discussed all afternoon, location is crucial. And porosity, as David will discuss, is crucial. And being able to connect to the systems that exist and new systems that can be created is vital so that we don't make an isolated event, but something that plugs into our vital economic resurgence of downtown Cleveland that's ongoing on East 4th Street, in the warehouse district with the MedMart and the convention center redo, and potentially Public Square, which I'll show in a second. Next. So two of our students talked their way on top of the federal courthouse. Don't know how they did that. But you'll notice, let's go, I'm glad it's color-coded, it helps. We have 3 of the 4 sites on this slide. So to the left is Tower City and Huron Avenue, which again is about 90 feet above the Cuyahoga River. The red site is site number 1, that's the Riverview site. So it doesn't come up against Huron, and again, this is what's in the constitutional amendment, but it goes pretty much at that lower elevation below Canal Road, between Canal Road and the Cuyahoga River. The second site is Scranton Peninsula, that's the yellow, orange site. That is 61 acres by and large, it's the largest site. In some ways it's the most remote because it's really hard to get to, unless you're in the know. And most Clevelanders know that. It took me a while to get that education about how to get to Scranton Peninsula. But it is a big site. You'll see the barge that goes up and down, and we'll look at photographs from the site in a moment. Site number 3, the West 3rd Parking Street site, is really bisected by the Lorraine Carnegie Hope Memorial Bridge. So it is at a low elevation, currently used for parking for the Q and Progressive Field. So it's at a low elevation. David? So let's look at site number 1. Those are the constraints of it, again, hugged up tight to the river. And if we look at photographs from that site, next slide. Essentially, as you look north to the top, there's the ramp that would go to the parking that's behind Tower City that is no longer in use. See aspects of Tower City in the distance, but you're at a rather low elevation, and then in the center, kind of backing up a little bit, and then at the bottom, really a stunning view of the river, connection back to Tower City visually, and but it's a hike to get up, and it's all about how do you connect to the traffic of Huron and Ontario. And one thing that I've challenged all of my students, and I think Rock Ventures is pursuing the same strategy, although, Dennis, I have no idea if that's true or not. But these are sites to begin with, and I think life is a negotiation, and I think that there's a lot of discussion about what should or shouldn't happen, and I challenge the students to look at the sites, accept one of the sites if that's what they chose to do, and then challenge it. So if it was left wanting, what would they do to make it work? What would they do to make it better? So that's what they've been pursuing. Let's go to the second site. And I'm sorry if I'm talking quickly, I just want to go through this so we can move on. Second site, Scranton Peninsula, again, the largest. Next, David. The views from Scranton Peninsula are stunning because as a lot of people that do architecture and urban design, it's not so much being in the city that is the stunning view, it's the view of the city and the skyline. So that's across the river in Tower City, but again, at the bottom, it is remote. And so to get to it would require more infrastructure, would require more public investment, one would assume, although who knows, for freeway access, roadway access, and transit access. Next. Site 3, West 3rd Street. Again, in some ways, the oddest site, right below the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge. It's accessed quite readily for parking for the Q and Progressive Field. Next. And you'll see some of the photographs of there. It really, in some ways, straddles both of those bridges, the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge and the Interbelt Bridge. But it's low. Next. And the fourth site, in some ways a curious site, we've always thought of that as the perfect site for perhaps a temporary casino, but not so sure a full-time or the main casino being in there in the sense of being declarative as a casino. It really wants to announce its presence. Hard to imagine that in the Higbee building. Next. So the view from the Dixon and Eaton and the BP building, essentially Higbee building off to the left, just above Ontario Street, connected to the Tower City complex. And the view from on the bottom is really next to KeyBank Tower, looking toward Tower City. So a piece of wonderful Cleveland fabric, largely vacant and so accessible to some degree if we could move the tenants out on the first few floors. So those are essentially the four sites. And my students, I would say half of them, roughly, have chosen one of the sites as given, and half have been given freedom to explore other alternative sites, knowing that full well that may or may not be possible. But the question for the studio is how do we do gaming in Cleveland in the strongest possible way that's authentic to this place and makes it as vibrant as possible. So just very quickly, David, I'd like to go through the next few slides. This is the work that Cleveland Urban Design Collaborative did in concert, really with field operations. This is their work. We were there in support. You've probably seen this in the Plain Dealer, but it's important to know, in addition to the East Bank of the Flats, the port, which is on hold a little bit right now, the MedMart, thoughts for Public Square, because I think it's important in terms of if the casino goes in any of the sites that we've chosen, it's all about connections. This project was all about connections. So next, the scheme that was most discussed was the Thread-It scheme, creating an artificial hill over the intersection to allow traffic to exist and making a place for people. Next. And these are the other sites, the Frame and Forest and Webb, and we can always refer to these in the Q&A session afterward. Next. But a sense of how do you, and I think this is an important part, how do we as Clevelanders who are so used to seeing our city can envision it as something completely different and transformed? And I think that James Corner and field operations were able to do that with this kind of work that is provocative and fresh, and perhaps the way we think about place, next, can be transformed in things that are familiar and also something that is vastly different.